Canadians could claim up to $5,000 in proposed CRA settlement. Former CRA employee arrested for claiming CERB payments while employed. Accused benefit from fraudulent benefits by manipulating data, says RCMP. Tribunal confirms firing a federal bureaucrat who received $14,000 from CERB. You applied not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4, not 5, not 6, 7 times. You applied 7 times for CERB, and you said, that's a mistake. And why doesn't the board have empathy for me in my situation? Canadians already know the CRA is a complete mess, with some of the worst wait times in the world and information so unreliable that even Liberal MP Wayne Long called it rock bottom. What we are now learning is that rock bottom was not nearly low enough. As details emerge about the firing of more than 100 CRA employees over improper CRB claims, and those revelations are combined with repeated and inexcusable security breaches, the result has been a massive class action lawsuit against the Government of Canada and the CRA, entitling Canadians possibly up to $5,000. Let's take a look. Ladies and gentlemen, we start at the Federal Public Sector Labor Relations and Employee Board. Why are we starting here? Well, we wanted to show you that there are a whole bunch of challenges from folks that have been fired from the CRA for taking CERB payments. Now, one would think that if you steal money from the Canadian people and that money is intended for people that were off work as a result of being forced to not work during COVID, and then they got caught and then they got fired for it, you would think that that would be it, right? Well, apparently not. And we've talked about this when it comes to the Public Servants Alliance of Canada, or PSAC, which is one of the most powerful unions in the country. They represent around 300,000 or more federal employees. So what they've done is, for many of these employees, they've actually filed a grievance and said, no, you can't fire them. You can't fire them for taking money. That's not right. What? But yes, that's what's happening. Now, the great thing is that all this information is public record. So let's take a look. So these are upcoming hearings, folks. Upcoming hearings, at least at the time, that were scheduled. And this one obviously hasn't been dealt with, but you can see that the person's name is Gaik Pin Lim and Canada Revenue Agency. So basically the first name of the person and Canada Revenue Agency is where they actually worked at. And what's the subject of that? Non-disciplinary termination. Then we get into disciplinary matters, termination, disciplinary matters, termination. That's in Ottawa. Calgary. In February, we're going to Manitoba, Winnipeg, where there's 2 more people that are facing disciplinary termination. And then in March is going to be a busy month, folks, because we have non-disciplinary termination, disciplinary termination, termination, and then there's one non-termination issue. And then there's 2 more disciplinary termination matters in Ontario and in Alberta, but they're all over the place here, folks. 2 more in April. One which is related to termination. So this is what's been happening since these employees were fired way back in 2024. And we covered that story when it happened, and there was a lot of justifiable outrage about it because you have government employees that are giving themselves CERB or applying for CERB, knowing how to skirt around these rules and how to skirt around the forms, and they are rigging the system or using the rig system because they know it. Meanwhile, you had people that wanted to work, but were not allowed to because of all the lockdowns. So here's an example of what happened when one of these employees actually went through this. And it's pretty crazy. So this was actually back in April 2025, and this came out during the election, so it didn't get a lot of coverage at all. We missed it, and I imagine a lot of other people missed it as well. So it says, tribunal confirms firing a federal bureaucrat who received $14,000 from CERB. And this case says it appears to be the first ruling on a grievance filed by a bureaucrat who opposed their firing for improperly receiving CERB. If you were a public servant working for the federal department responsible for CERB, you shouldn't have applied for the $2,000 per month pandemic benefit 7 times. That's a lesson that Jacqueline Byrne, a former Service Canada benefits officer at Employment and Social Development Canada, or ESDC, learned the hard way from a federal labor relations board. And that's what we were just looking at, folks. Byrne's case appears to be the first ruling on a grievance filed by a bureaucrat opposing their firing for receiving CERB while working in the public service. In a statement provided by her lawyer, Byrne said the decision was, quote-unquote, very disappointing, and failed to consider the hectic and confusing atmosphere early in the pandemic. Quote, the CERB was rolled out very quickly and many people were confused about it, including myself. I was also living through a terrible time with the deaths of both of my parents during the pandemic. This was the worst time of my life, and I feel like ESDC and the board didn't have any empathy for my situation whatsoever, end quote, she wrote. The ruling notes that Byrne appeared to have doubts about her eligibility and called the Canada Revenue Agency helpline twice to check. She said the agents advised that she might be eligible for CERB because she claimed to have lost her self-employment income, and that if she wasn't, she would have just to pay the money back. Now, she did have a home kind of crafting business that she was doing, and she was making around something like $1,000 a month off of that, and she anticipated that she was going to be, losing that, or that was going to be taking a hit during COVID. And that seems to be what she was talking to the people on CRA about. Oh, I have a home business, and I imagine I'm going to be losing income. So CRA people were like, oh yeah, sounds like that's fine. And if it's not, well, just pay the money back. Moving on. But Rosenberg said the quote-unquote uncurious Byrne gave only the information that she thought would lead to the answers she wanted to hear and, quote, maintain plausible deniability, end quote. I'd also like to know how she actually got to speak to somebody at the CRA. That's a miracle in itself. She also noted Byrne was far from forthcoming in the call. She, quote-unquote, misled the agent, omitted to say who she was or that she worked for ESDC, and falsely claimed that she had lost her craft business income according to the decision. So you're saying it was a confusing time, and you're saying that you called to double check, and all these calls were recorded, thank goodness, but you don't even bother to mention that you work for the federal government and that you applied not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4, not 5, not 6, 7 times. You applied 7 times for CERB, and you said, that's a mistake, and why doesn't the board have empathy for me in my situation when I'm defrauding the Canadian taxpayer out of $14,000 worth of taxpayer money? Are you kidding me? And folks, I'm just getting started. This is about to get a whole lot crazier. So here's a case by the Federal Public Sector Labor Relations Board, and this was brought forth via a grievance from the union and Ferdinand, I'll just call him Ferdinand N because I can't say his last name, and the Canada Revenue Agency. Okay, so what happened here? Well, apparently, Ferdinand is saying that he was a tax auditor, and he was a tax auditor position with the Canada Revenue Agency, and he was terminated on March 6, 2024, according to the employer, claiming a $2,000 payment under the CERB while working for the CRA and not being entitled to receive such a benefit. You would think that a Canada Revenue Agency tax auditor would understand that. On March 11, 2024, he grieved his termination. On June 20th, 2024, the employer denied the grievance at the final level of grievance process. On July 25th, 2024, he referred his grievance to adjudication, and now we're here. So, what did the employer say? Well, the employer is saying that he actually acted dishonestly and made a serious mistake and betrayed the employer's trust. His action was deliberate. He knew that he was not eligible, and he was negligent in correcting the situation, and he chose to do nothing and let things go. He was on parental leave when he applied for CERB. He was already receiving employment insurance benefits as well as an employer top-up. He tried to get $2,000 that he was not eligible to receive. On August 31st, 2020, his spouse allegedly, according to him, applied for the CERB for him by mistake. At 12:33 p.m., he received an email that his CERB application had been received, and his spouse received an acknowledgement of receipt 4 minutes later. Both applications were allegedly made on the same computer. His spouse cannot have made both applications in 4 minutes. This is impossible. It is a cover story that the griever made up. His story is not credible. He made no serious efforts to correct the situation. He went back to work 2 weeks later. He did not call the dedicated CERB line to report the so-called mistake. He testified that he could not produce the phone records from 2024, his spouse's phone, because she had changed service providers and the previous provider did not want to help. Ladies and gentlemen, this is nuts, because just pertaining to the phone records, I don't know how many of you watch Judge Judy, but the amount of people who, when asked to produce phone records or asked to produce texts, and then they say, well, you know, I changed providers and I don't have it. Or, oh, I just got a new phone. I don't have the... Bull caca. Bull. I don't care who you are. Give me a break. You don't have these phone texts? Give me a break. As an IT guy, yeah, they're there and you just don't have them. So back to this. So he testified that his own provider did not list unanswered calls on his phone records. That's complete bunk, because they're all of them do that. And he also testified that he sent 2 $1,000 checks in the same envelope to repay the CERB. Yet his spouse testified that they only sent 1 $2,000 check. He submitted no evidence of the checks that were mailed. So this decision is very long, very, very long. And the person adjudicating this was like, well, you know, the story's plausible and it sounds like they tried to repay it and it's not their fault that the CRA is a mess and all of this other stuff. Meanwhile, give me a break. Like, your wife just goes and applies for CERB without you knowing? Really? Really? And you know that, and then you go back to work 2 weeks later and you don't tell anybody. Mr. Tax Auditor. Really? Yeah, I'm not buying it. But apparently the person who was reviewing the case did buy it. What happened? Well, the order was this. The grievance is allowed in part. The termination is overturned, so he was forced to be rehired back to the CRA and substituted with a 1-year suspension without pay ending March 6, 2025. The employee should reinstate the griever in the Greater Montreal area to a position at the same group and level as the one that he held when he was terminated. The employer must pay him his full compensation retroactive to March 6, 2025, including the salary and benefits that he would have received had the employer employed him at that date. So what happened? So he was fired on March 6, 2024. And what this hearing concluded in September of this year, September 24th, I believe. And so what it was ordered is that, well, you know, okay, so he made a mistake, so that was bad, but he tried to correct it. So we're going to give him a 1-year suspension without pay from March 6th, that was the time that he was fired, 2024, until March 6, 2025. So that has now been served up to this point, because this is now September 2025 where this hearing is happening. And then what they're saying is, but you have to give him his job back. You have to hire him back. And by the way, from March 6, 2025, all the way up to September 24th of 2025, yeah, you owe him back pay. You owe him 6 months of back pay plus benefits, plus all the seniority, plus all the pension contributions. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And these are just two cases of the 120 employees. This is insanity. You would think that if you work for the CRA, you should know better than any Canadian on the planet who's to qualify for CERB. But all these people were like, well, I made a mistake. Jacqueline Byrne said, I made a mistake 7 times. Mr. Tax Auditor, the guys who have the biggest attention to detail in the business. It was a mistake. My wife and I don't talk even though we live in the same house during lockdown. What? No, I don't think so. But strap in, folks. We're just getting started. Former CRA employee arrested for claiming CERB payments while employed. Accused benefit from fraudulent benefits by manipulating data, says RCMP. This is way back in August of 2023. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police has arrested a former Canada Revenue Agency employee for allegedly manipulating the system to receive COVID-19 benefits from the government while still employed. The RCMP's Provincial Financial Crime Team has charged 39-year-old Melissa Jensen Webb, a resident of Dawson City in Yukon, after she allegedly embezzled nearly $20,000 in Canada Emergency Response Benefit, CERB, and Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit payments while she was a full-time employee of the CRA in Alberta. What is going on at the CRA? Tens of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars disappearing because all of the CRA employees are making mistakes. Now, the interesting thing is so far, we cannot find one shred of what has happened since this lady was arrested. So don't know if the case is concluded, don't know if it's stuck in the courts, don't know yet. But we're going to keep digging on that to see if we can find out what ended up happening there. And we'll give you an update in a later video if we end up getting that information. But what is going on? And this is, remember back during ArriveCan? All we heard from all of these people that worked for the government, the Cameron McDonald's, the Tony Utanos, the people in PSPC, the purchaser, like everyone was like, well, it was a hectic time, so therefore everybody broke the rules. That's what we heard. Well, you know, you can't expect us to maintain your records for $60 million in payments to ArriveCan. You can't expect us to maintain that. You can't expect us to maintain records for everything. And it sounds like these CRA employees were like, it's going to be a hectic time. Money's flying out the door. No one's going to care about it. Maybe I'll just dip my hands in a bit. That seems to be what's happened here. How do you all have the same excuse? Well, it was a mistake. Come on. Enough Canadians that didn't work for the CRA understand that they weren't qualified for CERB. Everyone understood. If you were still working, if you were still getting paid by your employer, you're probably not eligible for CERB. Never mind manipulating data. So says this criminal charge. And she was charged multiple times. Multiple violations under the criminal code. Now, in addition to all of that, we also have the CRA hack that happened way back. Remember that? We reported on that. So here's the story we reported on. Tens of thousands of taxpayer accounts hacked as CRA repeatedly paid out millions in bogus refunds. We went over this chart, and basically what these hackers had did is they were able to actually get into the front end of the system into, say, Bob Smith's tax account. And once they were in there, they were able to change where the bank account should actually be and the postal code and everything like that. And then when they filed a fake return, that money was sent into that fake account and then off it goes. And they didn't detect any fraud whatsoever. And at the time, what we were saying is all the person would have received is a notification that their email had changed. And that's it, because the hacker would have changed the email so that any other changes to the account wouldn't be sent to the person that actually owned the account. So you change the email and then you hope somebody misses it because of all of that. And then you're essentially free to do all of your malicious work in the account. So the good thing is that some Canadians have decided, you know what? Enough is enough is enough. I'm tired of this, and it's costing me money. Costing me money because I was affected by this. So this is what's happening now. Canadians could claim up to $5,000 in proposed CRA settlement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is as a result of a class action lawsuit being brought forth against the Government of Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency. Canadians who have online accounts with the Canada Revenue Agency and the Government of Canada could soon cash in on a proposed class action settlement. In August 2020, the Canadian government responded to quote-unquote credential stuffing attacks mounted on the GC key service and CRA accounts. After the cyber attack, Todd Sweet initiated a class action against the CRA and the Government of Canada, alleging that there were quote-unquote negligent in safeguarding the confidential information of Canadians, leading to widespread privacy breaches, end quote. In the class action lawsuit, Sweet claimed that inadequate safeguards within several online government portals allowed bad actors to access the online accounts of Canadians without their consent. He also alleged in many cases these bad actors used real accounts to apply for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. So here's another article regarding this. Sweet versus Canada. Federal Court of Canada certified privacy breach class action on Canada Revenue Agency, a case comment by an expert Canadian tax lawyer. So this is part of this article, and I want to bring your attention to paragraph 2 here, where it says the plaintiff, Todd Sweet, is the class representative for his class action suit. He is a representative of Clinton, British Columbia. He asserts that on July 2nd, 2020, he logged into a CRA online account after receiving emails notifying him that his email address had been removed from his account. He discovered that his direct deposit information had been changed and that on June 29th, 2020, using his account, an unknown and unauthorized individual had made 4 applications for the CERB, a program initiated by the government to provide financial assistance to qualifying Canadians during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's a whole bunch of Canadians that are in this boat. Some of them were fighting, whether or not they actually had to pay back this CERB payment that they were allegedly had applied for, despite the fact that it doesn't match their address and it's not in their account and all this stuff. So this is where this lawsuit comes from, and they already have a list of all of the affected accounts of people that were hit. But we're going to get that to that in a minute. So this is essentially the crux of this lawsuit here. So the Canadian tax litigation lawyer on behalf of the taxpayers seek judicial relief from the federal court against the CRA based on the torts of systemic negligence, breach of confidence, and intrusion upon seclusion, as well as invoking the vicarious liability provisions of the Crown Liability and Proceedings Act. Taxpayers allege that CRA, due to operational failures, failed to properly secure the online portals providing access to these accounts. Furthermore, the taxpayer also asserts that the measures taken by the CRA at the end of 2020 to protect its databases, systems, and other relevant online accounts should have been taken prior to unauthorized data breaches. Now, usually in these cases, there is a firm that is brought in to help with this, and in this case, KPMG was brought in. So this is something from their website, Government of Canada Privacy Breach Class Action Proposed Settlement, and it gives a lot of information. So here's a summary of the actual overview. An approval hearing is scheduled to be on March 31st, 2026 at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, folks. That's Pacific time. In the Federal Court in Vancouver, British Columbia, and by video conference. So this goes over everything that we just talked about. Who's included? Well, you are a class member if your personal information on the Government of Canada online account in CRA was disclosed to a third party without authorization between March 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2020. What does that mean? That means if your account was hacked between that time, you are automatically in this class action lawsuit. That's what that means. And there's going to be a hearing at the end of March, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Now, one thing to note here. So we're recording this on January 10th, but as of January 15th, you can actually go to this link here, breachsettlementcanada.kpmg.ca, to actually check to see if you are eligible. So keep an eye out, keep that link handy. It's going to be in the description to see if you are actually included in this class, and it'll actually tell you if your account has been hacked. I don't know if ours has been here at Northern Perspective, but we're going to be checking that. So just keep that link handy, and as of January 15th, you may want to check that website. And I imagine there's going to be a lot of people going to that website, so it may be either slow or crash or what have you. Hopefully KPMG has their act together and is prepared to handle that load. Here's the proposed settlement details if this is approved. So access claims up to $80 for time spent addressing issues related to unauthorized access. So you may get a minimum of $80 if you're affected. Fraud claims up to $200 for time spent addressing fraudulent use of personal information, and special compensation up to $5,000 for out-of-pocket expenses related to the breach. Eligibility will be determined based on whether your information was accessed during the credential stuffing attacks between June 15th, 2020 and August 30th, 2020. So if you are a class member, you do not need to do anything. If the settlement is approved, you will receive instructions on how to apply for your compensation. So you literally don't have to do anything. If you're wanting to opting out of the class to pursue this on your own, you can do that, but you need to do some work here. So before February 20th, 2026, you'll have to click on some of the links on this website. Now, again, we will have a link to the KPMG website in the description, so you can check if you are affected and you want to opt out and initiate your own action. Here's some important dates regarding this class action lawsuit for everybody. So just take a look. So notice period begins December 22nd, 2025. Opt-out deadline, as we mentioned, February 20th. And the approval hearing is going to be on March 31st, 2026. And you have some contact information there below if you are affected and if you have any questions about this. So that is moving along quite quickly on this. And Canadians deserve some compensation if you've been affected by this. And it's inexcusable. It really is. And this is something I saw time and again, and it terrifies me about the government infrastructure. And there's folks that watch Northern Perspective that are familiar with some of the stuff. Some of them work inside of the government, and they've said the same thing. It's like, it's not good infrastructure. And Mark Carney starts talking about AI, and we need to be investing in that. You got to do the basics right for it. You want to get into AI? Give me a break. But here's the crazy thing, folks. We found another story. And it's insane. But this wasn't the last time the CRA was hacked. It was hacked again in August of 2025. Look at this. So this was released on the government website. Wasn't in the media that we saw it. And it says, on August 17th, 2025, the government of Canada was alerted to a cyber incident impacting the application interface of a third-party service provider's multi-factor authentication used for Canada Revenue Agency Employment and Social Development, so ESDC, and Canada Border Services Agency user accounts. The provider, Two Keys Corporation, discovered the incident, promptly informed the government, and launched an investigation. Routine software update resulted in a vulnerability that allowed a malicious actor to access phone numbers associated with CRA and ESDC accounts and email addresses associated with CBSA accounts of individuals who use the MFA service between August 3rd and 15th. So they're trying to say, well, it's not really important information. Pardon me. They got access to the phone numbers and the email accounts, which, using multi-factor authentication, that's kind of what you need to log in. Just saying. So if they end up getting the password to your email account, all they need is the phone number for the multi-factor challenge. Because you get the text message there and you say, yep, that's me, and then off you go. It's a mess. And here's the crux of this. Government agencies were told years ago, 'cause I was there, and I remember seeing this, and this was on calls, and this is via email. IT teams were told right at the beginning of the whole Russia thing in Ukraine that we need to be on the lookout for potential action against government infrastructure. We were told that back in 2021. So where are you, CRA, ESDC, some of the biggest departments in the government? What have you been doing? And it makes you wonder, how many other agencies are like this? I know mine wasn't when I left. Because I fixed it. I didn't fix it. I ran the department and put in a strategy that a lot of the good employees that I had under IT helped implement. And we turned that place around. Whether it's still like that, no idea. But it was fine when I left it that way. But this is the issue. listen to these crazy, crazy stories. Like, it's beyond belief. And I hope you've stuck with us to the end, because Canadians need to know this information. And there's like bits and pieces all over the internet. But when you put them all together and you show the incompetence, and you show the negligence and the maliciousness of these people that are taking advantage of bad systems, taking advantage of their position within the government of Canada and enriching themselves, stealing Canadians' money. And then when they get caught, they say it was a mistake. And in some cases, they say, oh, poor you. You can come back and get your job, and we'll even pay you 6 months in salary to actually come back, and all of the benefits that you should have received from that time on. This is insanity, folks. So this is another letter to write to your MP and tell them this is bonkers. This is beyond unacceptable. How many people have been fired at the CRA for allowing this to happen, for allowing the hack to happen? And why doesn't the government actually get some guts to fire these employees permanently, and even go after them criminally for defrauding the Canadian taxpayer of what little money we have left?